Okay, so thank you for tuning in today. What I thought I would show you today is a great point for treating fatigue due to weakness of the blood. So in this video, I'm going to talk about how blood is looked at from an Eastern medicine perspective, how the blood quality is measured, and a simple acupuncture point that is used to treat this issue. So this point is on the hand. It's in between the fourth and the fifth finger, and it's just in the webbing between the two fingers. This is called triple warmer channel. And now, as Westerners, when we hear talk about blood or blood deficiency, naturally our minds are turning to things like anemia, more specifically iron deficiency anemia, which is a common instance of weak blood, especially for women. And from there, we're all familiar with getting a blood test to measure various nutrients in our blood. So while Western medicine is often speaking about blood by its various nutrients, such as iron in the hemoglobin, vitamin B12, neutrophils, etc., and all of that's very useful, Eastern medicine is taking a broader look at the blood and looking at the blood as a whole rather than the minute parts. And this is important, for example, because we may be getting enough iron or enough B vitamins, for example, and yet we can still have weakness in the blood. So I'm going to show you this point here. I'm going to show you the acupuncture here. So I'm just going to do this triple warmer 2. So what I like to do is I like to make a fist here, and there we have it. So now when Eastern medicine practitioners are looking at the blood, they're looking mainly at the pulse, the tongue, and other bodily signs for an indication of weak blood or blood deficiency. So the pulse is measured using the radial pulse. And what we see in a person with weak blood or poor blood quality is a radial pulse that is thin. Okay, so this is the width of the pulse. And this is also an indication of blood volume. Okay, so an adult, like your average adult, let's say someone about 150 pounds, they have a blood volume of about 1.2 liters. Okay, so if the blood volume is not enough, then the pulse width starts to get thinner. The blood volume can get low for a number of reasons. For example, women with heavy periods, lots of blood loss after operation or after labor. Cancer can be a cause of this, as well as poor nutrition. I often see this in people who are vegan, sometimes vegetarian also, where people on this kind of diet have to work a little bit harder and more consistently at getting the right nutrients to keep their blood strong. Okay, so the opposite of the thin pulse is the wider pulse on a person with high blood volume. And this we typically see in a pregnant woman. So when a woman's pregnant, she's carrying typically 30 to 50% more blood volume than the average person. And all this blood is going to nourish the baby, to grow the placenta, and to grow the expanding uterus. Another way the blood deficient pulse shows up is when the pulse is weak overall and yet fast in spite of being in a rested state. Okay, so the weak pulse will feel like there's not much bounce to it. You know, when the pressure is applied, it's not giving much resistance. Now, the fast speed of the pulse is interesting. This type of pulse is typically seen with a person with iron deficiency anemia, where the hemoglobin is poor in oxygen, and so it's having to whip around the body faster to pick up more of the oxygen molecules because the blood's not able to carry very much oxygen at one time, so it's got to send the blood around to pick up more oxygen from the lungs. And so you can imagine why a person with blood deficiency is quite tired. Another pulse that shows up in people who are fatigued due to weak blood is called the choppy pulse. So this is more like the pulse kind of has this jagged, rough quality to it. When you press on it, it's kind of doing this kind of rough feel to it, as opposed to being very flowing, very smooth and slippery feeling in someone with a larger blood volume. And then we can also look at the pulse in terms of pulse positions. Each pulse position is reflecting an organ system. So when there's weakness in the organs that are most involved with blood quality and blood production, so this is the liver, the spleen, the heart, and the kidneys, seeing a weakness in some of these organs also points to what systems are going to be needing the most attention to restore the blood quality to bring someone out of fatigue. So for example, in cases of insomnia, where a person may be awake from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m., somewhere in there, the blood may be weak because the liver is not able to do its full cleaning of the blood when we're awake at this time. So in order for the liver to do its cleaning and rejuvenating work at this time, the body needs to be in a horizontal position, because then all the blood is going to flow back up to the liver. When this doesn't happen fully, the blood doesn't get cleaned, and you may have seen this when you wake up the next morning. Your complexion has a more pasty quality to it. It may be even a bit of a grayish hue to it. There may be some pimples or a little bit of redness, and this is all the toxins from the blood that didn't get cleaned out the night before. And so blood toxicity is also something that we can address with acupuncture. So blood is, of course, a very extensive subject, and so I'm just going over some of the basics. So now let's talk about the tongue signs for tiredness due to blood deficiency. So the tongue's the only muscle in the body that we can observe with our eyes directly. One thing that tends to show up on the tongue is an overall pale color. So the tongue should be a nice pink or light red, indicating a good blood supply to the tongue. And when it's pale, it means that there's not enough blood to nourish the muscles and other tissues of the body. Now, sometimes the tongue can look white, and that's not the same as pale. So white color can be caused by a thick coating on the tongue. And so for people that scrape their tongue, which is a good habit, by the way, if you can scrape the coating off, and if you still see a white or palish color, then it's possible that it's a blood deficiency. But sometimes if it is a coating and you scrape that off, then you start to see the more healthy color underneath. Now, if the paleness is on the sides of the tongue, this is indicating what's called a liver blood deficiency. If the paleness gets, if the liver blood deficiency gets extreme, then the sides of the tongue can also turn a little bit orange. I have seen this several times. And so this is a more severe type of liver blood deficiency. And this can also show up on the body as hangnails, peeling around the cuticle of the nail, also brittle nails, and that can all get cleaned up with correcting the liver blood deficiency. Now, if the liver is getting stagnated, then in addition to the blood deficiency, then we might get a little bit of a purple tinge to the tongue. So you'd have a pale tongue that's also a little bit purple. Now, another indication of blood deficiency on the tongue is a bright red tongue that's shiny. So this is what we call a mirror tongue. And this is where there is no coating on the tongue, and you don't even have the little bumps on the tongue, the papillae. So when that's all stripped off, then the tongue appears kind of shiny. And this is a type of blood deficiency. It often shows up when there's someone's not taking enough B vitamins, and it can also show up in what we call yin deficiency in Eastern medicine, where it's one step further from blood deficiency. It's a deficiency of the overall fluids in the body, not simply the blood, but a much wider range of fluids. So it's a more severe type of deficiency. Okay, so there you have some tongue and pulse signs of blood deficiency. And now, other signs that can show a blood deficiency or weakness are a pale or pasty complexion, pale lips, paleness of the inner eyelids, weak nails, peeling of the cuticle around the nail. You can also get, in women, you get absent periods, or periods where the blood quality, it has a very sort of dry quality to it, or a pale color. Can also be where the period is short, lasting 3 days or less. And also muscle cramps, interestingly, especially in athletes and children. And this is because blood nourishes the muscles. So if the blood is the demand on the blood is very high because of athletes, having to repair that muscle tissue, and children who are growing those muscles. So when the demand is high, then the muscle can be a little bit weak because it's not getting enough blood, and then you get fatigue as well as muscle cramps. And so often growing pains especially can show up in child athletes. I've seen this where you have the double demand. You have the demand of childhood, just growing the muscles for the first time, and on top of that you've got a very heavy workout schedule that is putting extra demand, and so you get these growing pains. And it really comes down to eating more of the right foods and getting enough rest, and then of course you can get acupuncture to help all of that. Okay, so there you are, just shown you one of the points that can be used for blood deficiency. Now this point here is triple warmer 2, it's called. In Chinese it's called ye men, and ye, the ye part, it means fluid. Ye men means fluid gate. And this is indicating ye means fluid, and it's referring to a fluid that nourishes the body, and blood is that fluid that is, the most nourishing fluid in the body. So I hope this was helpful, and I look forward to connecting with you again in the next video. Thank you.